Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is Hotcast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Go Iowa Awesome and Rivals.com. I'm your recruiting analyst and host, Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by Adam Jacoby, publisher of the site, as well as managing editor Ross Binder. Before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button, whether you're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're at. Drop that like, and then, of course, hit us with a comment as well. Your thoughts on today's game. Of course, that's what we're talking about. Caitlin Clark breaking Pete Maravich's all-time NCAA scoring record and so much more from the day. Celebrities, fortunately, injuries. We're going to be talking about the women's Big Ten tournament. Those seeds were determined today as well. I've got my blue light glasses on because it is late at night, but we are getting you the content that you want and need. So, Adam, you have been on the women's beat all year. I don't even know where to start. Like what questions to ask. Caitlin breaks this record. The environment was absolutely insane. This was my first time at a regular season women's game. Of course, I went to crossover at Kinnick this fall, but like I don't know where to start. I feel like you'd have a better grasp considering that you've been there throughout this whole season.
Yeah, the atmosphere at women's games has been unbelievable all year. And yet, even by Iowa basketball standards, even by the Caitlin Clark show standards, what we witnessed today, Sunday, was conservatively a top 3 game of Iowa season at Carver Hawkeye Arena, and most likely was the loudest environment that they've had all year. And that is saying a lot. That is, I mean, we're talking rarefied air here. We got there at before 9 a.m., and there were people that had been waiting, that had been tailgating. I mean, we're talking about tailgating for a women's basketball game. Like, just stop there. Tailgating on a Sunday morning for a women's basketball game. That happens in Iowa City. That happened Sunday. And people were lined up. And because for the college game day thing, they weren't doing assigned ticketed seating until 10:20. So while the hosts were there on the court, it was just everybody for themselves. And so people were rushing down to the seats just to be able to get there, just to be able to soak in that atmosphere. And it was an atmosphere that every other athletic department in the nation would kill for. That, again, not an exaggeration. Anybody, everybody wishes that their women's basketball team could put together an environment like Carver Hawkeye today. That is fact. It was packed. It was loud. It was boisterous. It was and it wasn't casual fans. It wasn't people there to see Travis Scott, although Travis Scott was there. It was, I mean, people were invested. People were trying to will Iowa to victory. Iowa didn't need the help, as it turns out, but like, that's what they were there to do. They were there to be basketball fans and to be loud and to be supportive and all of that. And they just so happened to also be there for one of the most like entertaining groups of characters and peoples and shows that they could possibly see. So it was, I mean, Eliot, you saw a great one. You saw an absolutely great one, but even the ones that didn't hit this level over the course of this season were amazing in and of themselves too. So, Ross, I had people texting me saying that it sounded loud on TV and this and that, but how did Fox talk about the environment, and how did it come through to viewers?
Yeah, I mean, it came through extremely well. It was, every time there was a eruption from the crowd, you could tell. There was a constant buzz of noise for most of the game, and then there were just like eruptions of peak noise when, someone made a three or there was a steal or a big play or just anything good happening. It was just notably got even louder, but there was just a kind of a electric buzz for the entire game from start to finish, just from the crowd, essentially. And I mean, as far as the Fox announcers, it was Gus Johnson and Sarah Kostek, I think. And they were. You were gonna say something, Adam?
Nope, keep going.
Oh, okay. And I mean, they were just thrilled to be in that environment and calling this game. And anytime announcers, they feed off the game, they feed off the crowd, and it makes your job so much easier when you don't have to do much work to gin up excitement for a game when everything is starting at like a 9.5 on the excitement level out of 10. So it's like, hey, all right, this is going to be good. And so they were just, kind of just there to document what was happening and, carry things along for the ride.
So
now, Eliot, you happen to know a little bit about exactly how loud it got at Carver Hawkeye Arena.
I was actually just gonna share this with you. I gotta find the tweet again because I lost it, but it's on here we go. So I was sitting next to Scott Docterman during the game. Of course, of The Athletic, does incredible work, has been really gracious to us from the get-go, and he was talking with me a little bit. He's got a monitor for sound on his phone that he checks repeatedly through games, especially when it gets loud. And this is a tweet verbatim from Scott. He said, several times today, Iowa has hit 116 decibels and rarely below 105 in game action. The most persistently loud indoor sporting event I've covered. Scott's been doing it for a long time. That says a lot. And, I mean, he said it. It's several times. It wasn't once. It wasn't a game-winning shot. It was Gabby Marshall's and 1-3 where she ultimately missed the free throw, but the corner three that she hit, I think it was in the fourth quarter. It was an incredible pass by Caitlin. I believe it was cross court to the corner that she drilled it. There was one of Kylie Feierbach's 17 steals or deflections or what have you. She was phenomenal today. That ultimately led to a layup by Hannah Stolke. I'm sure there were others. Like even just like the first 4 or 5 baskets were bonkers, insane. Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm sitting there. I've attended a good amount of games at Carver now through this season. We don't need to compare it to the men. We don't, because it's different. Caitlin Clark is different. This team is different. I've never had goosebumps covering a game in Carver Hawkeye until today. Those first 5 baskets, the national anthem, the pregame atmosphere, the amount of little girls, the amount of little boys that were in this arena saying, I want to be like Caitlin, is incredible, man. Like, there were moments throughout the game, a sad one, which we'll talk about momentarily, but there were moments throughout the game and pregame where, like, I'm a pretty sentimental guy. I was fighting back some emotion. Like, this is massive. For it to happen back happen in Iowa City, to a girl who's, from a woman who's from Iowa, to break not only Kelsey Plum's record, but Lynette Woodard.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay. Brain fart. I know her name. Lynette Woodard's record. And then Pete Maravich, who we all know, Pistol Pete. 44.2 points per game, break that record. And Lynette Woodard be in the building and receive a standing ovation from the crowd. You could tell how much that meant to her. She had said that she never experienced a basketball game or arena or environment like that for women's basketball because it's different in Iowa City. And you could tell how much that meant to her when she was standing out at center court. Everybody gave the standing ovation. She was pumping them up. It was palpable from where we were sitting. We were nowhere near half court. You could feel it, how much it meant to her. And
I'm getting goosebumps remembering it.
Exactly.
Because you're right. Everything that you're describing is exactly right. And like seriously, guys, I don't know if it comes through on Zoom, but like seriously, goosebumps because here's a perfect example. If you Google Lynette Woodard, one of the first things that's going to come up is a page. I think it's like kumemorialunion.com or something. Like if you see that in the Google results, this is what I'm talking about. But what it also links to is an article from when she broke that career record in 1981, Lynette Woodard. And the the article, which again was written in 1981, speaks very warmly about the fact that 1,100 people were there to watch her break the record. That was a big deal back then. 1,100. So, Woodard did get an opportunity to be an Olympian and win a gold medal. It was in LA when the Russians weren't playing the US, but hey, gold is gold. She did get an opportunity to be a Harlem Globetrotter. But to be able to stand at midcourt of a sold out college arena, to get that standing ovation as a recognition of that career that she had, not as an Olympian, not as I don't want to be rude to the Globetrotters and call them a sideshow, but for her work as a basketball player, as a women's basketball player, as a women's college basketball player. She got to live out something that she didn't get to live out when she was Caitlin's age, when she was that formative, like when she was the GOAT before the GOAT, when she was the GOAT before Cheryl Miller, as a matter of fact, when she was the role model essentially for Lisa Bluder when Bluder was playing at UNI. This was her opportunity, and Iowa deserves an incredible amount of credit for making it happen. But this was her opportunity to be given those flowers by a crowd that is not only big, but knows how important she was to the sport and to Lisa Bluder and to Jan Jensen. And it's also very helpful that Bluder and Jensen talk so glowingly about Lynette Woodard. Beyond lip service, beyond what somebody who was being insincere about it would think would be enough, right? Woodard mattered to Bluder, and the history involved in all of that matters to Bluder as a former AIAW athlete herself. And so, yeah, this felt like, I don't want to call it a wrong being righted, but this felt overdue, just by the sport in general, and the fact that she got to have that moment while wearing a Jayhawk pin. Like she is still a Jayhawk, but she got to have that at Carver Hawkeye Arena, standing there on that Tiger Hawk, and there was even one moment near the end where she got to hug Caitlin Clark when they were celebrating the record breaking after the game, and Caitlin said, anytime you want to come be our good luck charm, please do. And like it was that, like they want to still have Lynette be part of the program's fabric because it does matter to them that much, and not just for a moment, but for as long as that relationship can last. So yeah, the fact that they went so far out of their way to make that such an atmosphere and experience for Lynette, boy, what do you say, right? I don't even know how to put how great that is into words, guys. I really don't.
To me, I think this just repeatedly speaks to Coach Bluder and her appreciation for the game, for where she came from, for what and who set the standard of sport. And she's passed that appreciation, respect, and knowledge to her players. I mean, we also saw Caitlin Clark's idol, Myam Moore, today. So Caitlin got to have her idol, her role model. Coach Bluder did too, and like for them to get the recognition that you could kind of feel from Lynette. It was, I don't want to make this maybe something that it's not, but it was like a finally.
Yeah.
It was these people get it. These people know what I had to do, and they really truly appreciate what I was able to accomplish. Not just for being the first woman to be a Harlem Globetrotter, the woman to win an Olympic medal. It's the woman who did all those things on the court at for Kansas basketball, and it wasn't even Kansas fans; it was Iowa fans. Um, it's like how can you not romanticize that moment? How can you not romanticize women's basketball? The Iowa Hawkeyes women's basketball. And there's one photo that I am really happy. There are a couple. I tweeted this out today. If you want to see any photos of signs and fans, you can head over to my Twitter. It's at Eliot Clough. It's all right there for you. I'm so happy I did this. I'm so happy Yahoo and the Rivals National incentivized us or told us to walk around and get photos, get video, because there are a couple that really stuck out rather. There's an older gentleman who held up a sign that said, "I've waited 70 years for this." That's not it. A woman who had a big pom pom. You could tell she had a big personality just by looking at her. It's a sign that said "For Title IX." Like, how do you not see somebody who was able to go through and watch the what Lynette did before the NCAA and not think, hell yeah, hell yeah. I mean, it's so like it was that finally moment for Lynette, but it's been that finally moment for these women who saw Title IX come to fruition, and have seen the sport grow. So it's not only like, for example, when we're talking about the little girls and little boys looking up to Caitlin, did you guys read that article that was in I think it was the Star Tribune, of a father who wrote it was like an
Yes.
open letter to Caitlin. Um, so I'm 27, so it's starting to get into the point where might get married, might have kids here sooner rather than later. And for the first time in my life, I've thought about being a girl dad as opposed to just having a boy, like the guy mentioned in the article. And I got a little emotional when his daughter looked up to him and said, "She made that because she practices it so much, right, Daddy?" I was like, "Oh, right in the heart." And so I just felt that all morning, all afternoon, not only for the little girls and the little boys, but the women who accomplished what they have and got to see Caitlin accomplish what she has. Like it was almost like a divine, like I don't mean to be hyperbolic. I hope I'm not, but it's almost like a divine afternoon. Like there was a weight to today. There was a heaviness that you only feel in incredible moments like that. So somebody stop me before I start to tear up.
The one of the things that I liked best about that letter to the editor from the Star Tribune was sort of a recognition and we'll call it a vulnerability from the gentleman that wrote that letter, because he wasn't trying to make the case that he didn't know how to talk to his daughter, this or that, but the connection for them, like and I've heard this from other dads and other girl dads too, is it's not always as easy to make that connection, to be able to meet them at their level, or have them meet you at your level in terms of what your shared interests are, right? And so he got to learn how to share that interest with his daughter, and to feel that connection grow deeper and more rewarding. And it's, some people might hear that and say, well, that, why would you admit that, this, that, or like, oh, why? But the fact that he's willing to experience that, see it for what it is, process it and express his gratitude for getting to that place with his daughter, is a very emotionally mature, response to being able to experience this all. And one more thing that I'll throw in there, Eliot. Shout out to Brian Ray, the tremendous photographer for the University of Iowa, because not only does he create some of the most unbelievable photography and images, that, like, not only is he a worthy documentarian, for lack of a better term, for something like this, but after that letter went out, he went back and looked through his archive of photos. He found Caitlin signing the gentleman's, I don't know if it was a poster or shoes or a jersey, but signing whatever it was that the gentleman mentioned in his letter. Like, he found it and put it on Twitter and says, "Hey, I think this was you. I hope you enjoy this." Like, that is such a tremendously gracious thing to do. Because again, he didn't have to, right? No one was banging down his door and saying, "You owe this guy a photo, this or that." It was like, that is the sort of selflessness and care for whatever this culture is that really defines what Iowa women's basketball is about. And yeah, absolutely, it starts with Lisa Bluter and Jan Jensen and the other assistants that they've had for so long, and the culture that they instill and reinforce. Like, that is, it reflects on them, but it also reflects on the people that are around too. And so it's been incredibly gratifying to see, in a way that is only tangentially related to sports. And meanwhile, the sports are unbelievable too. Like, we're talking about a 26-14. We're talking about a team that is still, I don't want to call them a Final Four favorite, but they are more likely than most two seeds to make the Final Four. They still have national championship aspirations, and they play one of the most exciting brands of basketball you're going to see in men's or women's. Like, it's up tempo, it's fast paced. They play offense, they play defense. Like, this is what basketball aesthetically should look like. This is the fun basketball, and they play that too on top of being, I'm trying to stay objective here, but on top of being good and caring people, they play great basketball too. And how do you not buy season tickets for that? How do you not show up for that? How do you not break 116 decibels for that, right? Like, of course, when you look at it, of course.
Yeah. Retweet. I agree with all that. Speaking of, as we talk a little bit more about the environment, the list of people who were there today, on top of Lynette Woodard, on top of Myam Moore, Travis Scott was in the building. So one of our friends from the Tennessee rival site, Ryan Sylvia, sent me a screenshot of the photo or the video that I got of Travis going, "Let's go Iowa." And I said, "Today was a total trip. We definitely live in a simulation." Like, what the hell was that? Jake from State Farm? There was just like, Caitlin breaks the record. Like, the list goes on and on from today. It was crazy. The way Travis Scott was vibing to the pet band was hilarious. He comes over and shakes Lisa Bluter's hand. Like, it was just a absolutely wild day with a wild list of attendees. By the way, got a photo of Jake from State Farm in the tunnel before the game, and uh he was taking photos with other people that were just in there, and he saw that I was trying to get a photo of him before I went back out onto the court. He's wearing the custom jacket that he got from Use Check. What's her first name? Kristen?
Sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a big deal.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So I got the photo of him. He smiled and then he did like he was very much in character all day. Anyway, I got the photos and I said, "Thank you, man." And he points at me with a smile and says, "Appreciate you, bro." And like, it's just the craziness of all of the things lining up from today was just insane.
Oh,
Nolan Ryan was there. Is that what you just were gonna say, Ross?
yeah. I was gonna say, and don't forget that Nolan Ryan was randomly there too. Like, why? Just why? I don't know why. I don't understand. But Nolan Ryan, one of the greatest pitchers of all time, was at Carver to watch Iowa play Ohio State. It's just insane.
maybe
I don't know.
the strikeout king wanted to watch the points queen. Like they do something
I mean,
great better than anybody else over and
I mean,
over. There's something
great
to it.
greatness recognizes greatness, obviously. So
Yeah.
the just the amount of people that made the trip to Iowa City, man, that flew in to CID more than likely, and then either got a rental car or something, took the trip down to Iowa City. The list of photos that I got of people saying I traveled XYZ miles, I got Florida, Georgia, Washington State. Somebody drove 1,000 miles. Somebody drove 13 hours. Um, there
There's a Wyoming in there.
was
I don't know
there,
if that made a sign, but I did hear about somebody who had driven from Wyoming for
man.
this.
They
Yeah,
drove they drove through Nebraska to see Caitlin Clark. That is telling, I tell you
that's
what.
dedication.
I mean, I don't necessarily have a whole lot of other things to reference in regards to the list of celebrities who were there. To be quite frank, I'm kind of surprised there weren't more. I mean, Theo Vaughn was in the building for the Michigan game when she broke Kelsey Plum's record. I think there were some other ones. Who who's the guy that plays the coach in the football
Oh,
show?
the Ted
Jason
Lasso.
Sudeikis.
Yeah,
Yes,
Jason
Yeah,
Sudeikis made it earlier this season. Did Sue Bird make a game?
yeah, she
Like,
yeah.
was with him.
She was at the game with Sudeikis.
that's what I
So
thought. Um, I mean, and again, this goes back to the first thing that you said, Adam, is for women's basketball. Who would have thought, man? I mean, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I mean, I wouldn't have thought that. I never would have guessed, let alone to have a crowd that reacted that way. It was just phenomenal from top to bottom the whole day.
Yeah, you could make the case, and I appreciate you mentioning even like 5 years ago, because 5 years ago, like Megan Gustafson was one of the best players we had ever seen wear an Iowa basketball uniform. And you can absolutely make the case that these crowds should have been this big for her too. And there's a whole lot of people that would say, like, yeah, where were you guys? However, Caitlin Clark is a one of one. And there is something elementally pure about the basketball that she plays that draws people in. And Eliot, like you mentioned, it's the kids. Kids gravitate to Caitlin Clark in a way that they didn't for, well, I mean, Megan Gustafson. And clearly it's not something that is a reflection of character, because Megan Gustafson is one of the purest people we've ever seen. Like, regardless of the basketball, like a genuinely great person, but people didn't show up quite like this for her. Ross, what's up?
yeah, I was just gonna say. I mean, let's be honest. Logo threes are cool. Post, the post work in the paint is it's awesomely effective. It's not as cool as a logo three. So
Yeah. Are
Did
people not selling out Carver for the mic and drill? Come on now.
did did Meg so Meg was before my time of watching women's basketball. I'll fully admit it. I think the game has made incredible leaps and bounds and she was foundational to that. Did she run the floor like Hannah Stolke does?
No, but Hannah Stuelke was a track star.
Okay. I was
yeah.
just gonna say, like, maybe, hey, that's a little like fun, exciting part.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, she would have got a lot of transition buckets playing with Caitlin Clark. no doubt.
Caitlin would have
But
loved playing
oh,
with Megan. Absolutely. And, we
yeah,
might see it in the WNBA because it's not like the Fever can't pry Gustafson away from, I think she's still in Phoenix, but I might be wrong. Actually,
yeah,
she might have moved over the offseason. But regardless, we're talking about somebody who is a bench piece at the WNBA level. And hey, great for Gustafson for sticking around this long because she had to try really hard to expand her game. And it took her a while, and she didn't make the WNBA right away. But with her, you have to call them, size limitations with quotation marks because we're talking about someone who's what 6'3". But that that's not the same as being 6'7", like Cardoso at South Carolina.
yep.
You can't play post and strictly exclusively post in the WNBA at 6'3". You just can't. And so you can make a ton of money overseas, and that's what Gustafson has been doing in the meantime. And play post like that. I think she's with the London Lions as we speak, and she's also going to play for the Spanish national team. Ole. But in terms of playing for the W, the fact that she has added a perimeter shot to her game, just, something she never had to do at Iowa, never had to do in high school, but if she wants to play here, start stroking threes, and that's exactly what she's learned how to do too. So she is valuable. And you can absolutely say, like, hey, if you're the Fever, like, trade a second round pick for Gustafson, just put her and Caitlin in the same room and just like see what happens. Right? Like let's just let them practice together for a month. If it works, great. And if not, it's a second round pick,
You
So
got you got
I
Aaliyah
would like to see
Boston
that.
to start. If you
Yeah,
have Aaliyah
yeah,
Boston to
Yeah.
start Meg Gustafson off the bench, I think you'll be okay.
yeah. And also Kelsey Mitchell, who's one of the last names that Clark had to pass for the women's record. Yeah, she's also your shooting guard. So good luck. I mean,
That's
Caitlin's
that's
walking into
that's
a pretty great spot.
that's 1 and 2 all time in the Big Ten in scoring and 3-pointers right there, Clark and Mitchell. So
Around Aaliyah Boston. That's right. Yeah.
that's a lot of points. Um, I just wanted to go back to the crowd for a second, and you talking about just like the growth of the game, just in the 4 years that Caitlin Clark has been here. They mentioned after the game, I think in the senior day stuff, or maybe it was towards the end of the broadcast, I forget. But they when she started at Iowa, she essentially started playing against cardboard cutouts in the stands because of COVID. Her first year was that weird post-COVID year. And then, even after, that was relaxed, there were still games when she was, in her early years at Iowa, when Iowa still used a curtain to cover up some of the seats because it, wasn't a sellout, wasn't, they weren't selling 10,000 seats even or whatever. So, and that was 3-4 years ago. And to get from that point to where it is now, where they sold out the entire season in the summer in no time flat, and then this game had either the most expensive or one of the most expensive tickets on the secondary market for a women's basketball game. I mean, it's hard to comprehend almost just how rapid and massive the growth and interest and crowd sizes have been. It's remarkable, I think.
Speaking of crowd sizes, growth of the game, I think I can't speak for everyone when I say this, particularly my generation of sports fans. When we grew up thinking of women's college basketball, UConn across the board. Caitlin Clark said growing up, because of Myam Moore, she thought she was going to go to UConn. I'm assuming you caught that today in the presser, Adam.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
was like, there was a moment of, oh crap. Like, I guess.
And then she added, obviously that didn't happen.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Glad we're on the same page there.
I mean, there's an alternate timeline out there where she went to UConn or she went to Notre Dame, and those are dark timelines. So we're just gonna ignore those.
Exactly. Um, speaking of, oh, what was I gonna say? So when we're talking about, I legit don't remember what I was saying. Did you have something to say to continue there, Ross? The dark timelines.
No, I mean, I think you were just saying that when you were growing up, UConn was, the program
Right.
of its day, and that has changed in recent years. That UConn's still very much, a premier program, but their South Carolina is, every bit as good now. And for the last few years, thanks to Clark and Bluter and the rest of the team, Iowa has been, within that group as well. They're there now. Maintaining that spot is incredibly difficult, but with Clark, it's going to be a great run for the next month, I'm sure.
And also, I think, Ross, to your point, Iowa's standing as a program has been, if not permanently elevated, certainly elevated and will stay elevated past when Caitlin leaves. And one perfect example is the fact that come December, Iowa will be playing at the Barclays Center in this doubleheader, and that involves also, I believe it's UConn, Tennessee, and
Kansas?
Kansas.
I think
I want to
Iowa's
say.
playing Kansas.
All right, then there you go. So yeah, like blue blood territory all the way through and through. Because if all they were trying to do is get some rub off of Caitlin, then they would be a year too late, right? The probably ostensibly the most high profile player on that team next season is going to be Hannah Stuelke. And Hannah is not quite the magnet for attention that Caitlin Clark is. And neither am I, right? Like, neither are any of us. Caitlin's a one of one.
I don't know.
In terms
I
of
have
the
6,000
spectacle.
followers on Twitter, so
Well, Nike's going to be putting out the Clough ones at any moment now.
who's this Clow One? Who is this guy?
But
Well,
like Iowa is taking that step up and probably will have that elevated stature, especially if the recruiting, comes along in tow. But that stature is going to stick around for, I would say, as long as Lisa Bluter is there. Ross, do you agree?
absolutely. And I was just going to piggyback on that. And you mentioned the recruiting, and there were some massive, national recruits at today's game. Some top 20 overall recruits in the 25 and 26 classes. Emily Skinner, Addison Bjorn, Madden Greenway, who is the daughter of Iowa's own Chad Greenway. So, that's nice. Doesn't hurt. So, yeah, I mean, there's still a long way to go to get them and to any of them and for them to play and everything. But Iowa definitely has the ability to compete on a higher level of recruiting now than they did before Caitlin Clark, which is essential to maintaining, their ability to stay in that elite level. And having them in a game like this, I cannot imagine you could not script a better recruiting advertisement or trip or scenario than what they had today. Like, those girls are going to go to a lot of games and see a lot of programs, and consciously or not, they will compare all of them to the game they were at today and the Iowa fans and the Iowa team and program they saw today. And there will be other factors that they consider in their decisions, of course, but the impression that Iowa made today cannot be anything but a massive positive for them. Eliot, you were going to say something, I think.
You know what we didn't mention on the list of folks who attended? Holly Rowe emceed Iowa senior night. What a flex, dude.
Yeah.
To be able to do that and to talk about the state of the program and Coach Bluter with all these recruits there. I mean, like, I was a very mediocre track athlete, but if and who barely made D1 and was a walk-on. But if I had this opportunity to whatever the equivalent of Holly Rowe is in track and field, be like, where do I sign? That signing period, I heard they're making 3 of them now. Is that one of them tomorrow? Because sign me up. You don't have to give me any NIL money. I just want to be, no, just kidding. I would not say that, but I would want to be part of it. Like, and to be at a school that can offer NIL money to the women and will and chooses to, be part of and focus on NIL with the women's team, and that has Caitlin Clark, who is a national commodity in NIL. Like, we can do this. We've done it. Look at this.
Yeah, it's proof
And
of concept.
exact and
Yep.
are continuing to recruit the state of Iowa as well, bringing in that girl who just won a state title from Solon. I think she's in the 24 class. I'm not
Kelly
following
Levin.
recruiting. Who?
Kelly Levin.
There you go. And just brought in a recruit from Alaska to visit. Like, this is a if Iowa is on a women's basketball is on an upward trajectory. I don't know how, but like, they're making it happen. They're getting their money's worth, like State Farm did with Jake today. They got their money's worth. Let me tell you, it's almost as
Oh,
good
yeah.
as Cheez-It did in the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl this football season. But the amount of things that add up to being the place that a girl who's looking for a home and a place that she can grow her game and probably make some money and have fun and be around, like you said it, Adam, good people. Like, I have no idea how these girls have stayed grounded to the degree that they have. No idea. If I was Caitlin Clark, my head wouldn't fit through any doorway in the house that I'm in right now, let alone like Molly Davis, who we haven't talked about yet. But like, oh my gosh, it's incredible. You find yourself at a loss for words. That's what I meant when I say that, or when I said that it was almost divine. It was almost a religious experience today because of the sheer amount of positive factors and elements to this team, the situation, the rising of the sport, and everything that goes into it. Now, oh, Adam, do you have something you want to say?
There's one game that I've ever compared to a religious experience. One Iowa Hawkeyes game that I've ever compared to that, and it was Iowa Penn State football 2021. Like, that environment was, prior to what the Caitlin Clark show became, that environment, and it was one of the first games where we really got to see that north end zone of Kinnick Stadium really flex its muscles and really, like, the noise is going to become its own main character in this whole situation. Like, the fans are taking this thing over, whether anybody likes it or not. That was the first and only time where I was ever like, man, holy crap. Until today. And today felt like something, like you said, Eliot, something larger than just people sitting in a room watching these 10 people play basketball. It felt like a lot more. And some of it was the history surrounding it. Some of it was, understanding, I mean, the fact that they brought out Lynette Woodard, the fact that they brought out, and celebrated these young women, for senior day, and really, like, drove home how well connected they are. Like, it's impossible to see all that and not internalize some of it, and not say, yeah, having that culture is really great. Like, it's awesome that I get to, like, that fans get to cheer for that. Like, if I were a fan and I got to see not only this team, this number 16 or number 6 team in the nation beat number 2 and really control the game from start to finish. But there's nothing to feel bad about it too. Like, you don't have to plug your nose and look the other way about number, no one's causing trouble. There's no, like, it's something a little bit pure. And how do you not feel something about that? Right? That it feels like this is what sport ought to be about, regardless of anything else. Like, this is why sports are good. That's what we saw at Carver today, I would say.
So we cannot continue without talking about Molly Davis.
Yeah.
Unfortunate injury that happened in the first half. It was one of those moments that I nearly got emotional today, is when she was being carried off and the crowd started to chant Molly, Molly, where else does that happen? A very sad moment for what has been such a fun season for her, in that role, a breakout year for her. I think that's something we started talking about at the crossover at Kinnick. And it did come to fruition. She was so fun to watch this year. I mentioned on a podcast, I think a couple weeks ago, that my girlfriend knows who Molly Davis is now, right? Like, she's just so easy to cheer for, so easy to root for. She goes down with an apparent knee injury. We don't know the extent of it. We won't know what it is until tomorrow. That's what Lisa Bluter said post game. So that's the first thing we have to say in regards to her injury is, golly, that sucks. That just flat out sucks. On what was supposed to be such a positive, fun day, to have that be a factor, and it just blows. Especially as women's Big Ten tournament is right around the corner. And the NCAA tournament is as well. Braden Roberts, one of our women's writers, is on it, going to be talking about how Iowa will replace a player like Molly in the starting, or I guess in the starting lineup, but in the lineup in general. Adam, when you look at that, and again, we'll have that in the description once Braden gets that article out. But when you look at that situation, who do you think they'll look to? You can't replace a player like Molly, but to fill that absence in the lineup, is it Kylie Feierbach? Is she going to be getting more minutes? Is it somebody else that they're going to look to? What's it going to look like?
Well, I actually touched on this in the number 3 of my deep 3 in the recap, because, like, how do you not talk about how Iowa recovers from this? We saw a little bit from Iowa in the second half that might be a little instructive in how they respond to the Molly Davis injury. And you know, you don't want to assume, but based on how long she was down, based on the fact that they had to carry her off, based on the fact that they had her entire leg wrapped, which says, hey, we're worried about swelling, and you know, this is probably going to need some surgery. And I mean, the fact that it's already March, I hope I'm wrong, but it really does seem like this is it for her year. And that would be a real shame. So you do have to talk about what is going to come next. And so far, I mean, we saw a little bit of Taylor McCabe, and she was a little bit in over her head against the Ohio State defense, but more we saw a lot more of Kylie Feierbach. She played 10 minutes in the second half. All 4 of her steals came in that second half, when she was just jumping passing lanes over and over, to the point where it's like, I'm not sure Ohio State expected Kylie to be playing defense, right? Like, she was so disruptive to what they were doing, especially in that third quarter, that, like, the Buckeyes looked legitimately taken off guard by her defensive intensity. So
Phil Parker ought to be giving her a call. That's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
Ben Keeter won't be the only dual sport athlete here soon enough.
Hey, I mean, Caitlin even said, like, this is the way Kylie always plays: long arms, you know, great eyes for the ball. Like, it's all there. Quinn Schulte, your job is not safe, young man. Not safe at all. No.
Why'd you come back, Quinn? Why'd you come back, man?
Portal it up, Schulte. No. But to actually get this one back on track, you know, Feierbach brings some of the things to the table that Molly Davis can do. Tania Folter can do some of the things that Molly Davis can do. You know, Folter does some other things better than Molly, but you know, Gabby Marshall has been starting next to Molly. So how much you want to put on her plate, you know, we'll see. But in terms of a like one-to-one apples to apples, you know, Gabby is probably the closest you're going to come to a skill match. But even then, Gabby is not the open court creator that Molly Davis is, because and nobody other than Caitlin Clark is either on this team. And so like we're not running down anybody on this roster by saying that they are not quite what Molly Davis is. It's just like you could say that about most of the rest of the Big Ten too. But what we've seen from Gabby is not quite the improvisational I mean, whirling dervish sort of play that you see from Molly on a basically game by game basis. I mean, the fact that she is so consistently brilliant in the way that she plays, that's going to be tough. That just, I guess, unpredictability, that next level chess understanding of where to be before the defense knows that they're supposed to be covering there. You know, that is probably too much to ask out of one player. But when you look at the things that a Folter can do, when you look at the things that Gabby can do, when you look at the things that Kylie can do, and you say, all right, well, you know, if they each get 7 more minutes, then there's 21 taken care of right there out of, you know, that would have been coming from Molly. You know, that's a way to get there. But then even on top of that, you know, we learned today that Kenise Johnson, the point guard, is out for the year too. She had suffered what we believe is an ankle injury at practice. So she was on crutches. She's listed as out for the season. So that's 2 point guards. And Kenise was at the end of the bench. But, you know, that end of the bench just got one person closer with Molly Davis being out. And now Kenise is out. Like, that's 2 people with ball handling skills that, you know, especially in March, might be a little bit valuable. Molly more so than Kenise, but I mean, regardless, that is going to require a little bit of step up from the rotation players around Caitlin Clark and everybody else. Does Iowa have that in them? That's an open question. I mean, that is because when you look back at when Molly Davis was sick and she was technically playing, but not playing very often, Iowa went 2-2. Iowa does not have 2 more losses this season that they can afford, because that second one is going to be in the NCAA tournament if the first one isn't. So, like, the safety net is gone, and Molly Davis is out. But no one said any of this was going to be easy, right? This is welcome to basketball, welcome to March. Like, sorry, it got tougher. So what now what? And now it's time for Iowa to answer that question without one of their biggest playmakers. And that's going to be really difficult.
In regards to that injury, I don't know that this is necessarily a positive outlook for the immediate future, but I did see that Molly, I caught a photo of her as she was going up the hallway, that she was on crutches, wasn't in a wheelchair. So if anything, that's like she's moving on her own. That's good to see. And whether or not that turns into her playing is obviously still up in the air and probably less likely than more likely. But to see her on crutches was a positive thing, I thought.
I mean, one good thing for in terms of the schedule is that Iowa is off for almost 2 weeks after the Big Ten tournament this weekend. There's next week is the men's Big Ten tournament, and then after that, the following weekend is when the NCAA tournament would get underway. So, you know, assuming it's not, you know, the worst case scenario of like a torn ligament or something like that, then if there is any possibility of a return this season, you know, there are almost 3 weeks from now until when she would play again for Iowa in the NCAA tournament. So, if you're looking for a silver lining, I think that's maybe it. That if there is good news about the injury, then there would be some time to rest and recover before she sees the court. I mean, I think this weekend in the Big Ten tournament, obviously, is going to happen too fast for any recovery. It would be my guess, but after that, there is that gap until the NCAA tournament, so maybe that can help out.
And the NCAA tournament is 3 weekends long, technically. So, even if Molly's not ready for week 1, if by some miracle the start of April is on the table, then, maybe there's something there. But, it really does feel like that's probably going to be the end of Molly Davis's Iowa career. And gosh, that's such a shame, because it really does feel like the rest of the nation is being cheated out of understanding what a joy it is to watch Molly play by not being able to see her on TV for March Madness. Like when those big, like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 million audiences, like that is who you really want watching Molly Davis, because she is that easy to root for. In fact, I'll even tell you guys, when I took my sister to a game earlier this year, it was the one game that I watched in a non-work capacity. She and I both agreed that Molly would have been my mom's favorite, right? Like that is the sort of player that Molly is. I think she's, if you were going to pick a non-Caitlin Clark player, which is some stuff my mom would have done, but if you're going to pick a non-Caitlin favorite on the team, I mean, there's no shortage of good options even then, but Molly is something just different enough, just fun enough, just smart enough. And like she even said, Eliot, at during her senior day thing, she's not the biggest. You don't have to be the biggest, you don't have to be the fastest or the smartest to do this at a high level. And she is once again like the living proof, the proof of concept. And man, it stinks that we're not going to get Tournament Molly this year. Oh, it stinks.
The other thing I'll mention here is that Iowa did beat the number 2 team in the country with her missing the majority of the game. So that is something to be said about this team and what they're able to do. And golly, I'm going to write about Kylie Feierbach tomorrow. She was awesome today. Awesome. Defensively, ball handling. I mean, I was really, really impressed, and she's going to be a big part of this team going into next year as well. So as we're talking about the Big Ten tournament, I've got the picture in front of me. We'll talk about this and then we'll get out of here, but because it is 11:24. But Iowa does have a double bye. They will play the winner of Wisconsin and Penn State in their first matchup. They are the 2 seed in the tournament. So once assuming they beat Wisconsin or Penn State, they are likely to play Indiana in the semifinals before the championship game. So this is where that 1 versus 2 seed becomes very clear in who has the advantage versus who doesn't, because Ohio State would play Michigan State in the semifinals, though it took a Caitlin Clark wild shot for Iowa to beat Michigan State at home this year. Michigan State versus Indiana, that's 2 different things. Granted, as well, Minneapolis is probably going to be Carver Hawkeye Arena North, so Iowa will have an advantage in that regard.
Yeah, no, probably about it. It will be.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess
one thing to point out about Indiana, this may or may not end up being something notable for the end of the week. But Mackenzie Holmes, who gave Iowa the business in Bloomington the last time they played, apparently tweaked her knee and left the game in the 3rd quarter herself. Didn't return, but at the very least walked off on her own power. Was sitting on the bench by the end of the game. We'll see whether or not she can go in the tournament. If she can't, or if Indiana says, hey, let's protect her for March Madness, which, again, like you said, Eliot, 2 weeks it can be some very, very useful 2 weeks. If Terry Morin says, hey, risking her for the Big Ten tournament when we're already in and we're already going to be a high seed, they're probably already going to be hosting the first 2 rounds. Like, they might say that it doesn't make sense to risk it with Holmes this soon after tweaking her knee. And if that's the case, then the math around how Iowa attacks Indiana and vice versa changes quite a bit. So that's something to monitor, especially because Lily Meister, who's a backup forward for the Hoosiers, also like hurt her ankle in the same game. So Iowa is at the very least not the only Big Ten team that all of a sudden has some depth questions. So we'll see whether or not once all these teams get up to Minneapolis, how much that matters.
Anything either of you want to add before we hop out? No? Good?
Nope.
Once again, folks,
Nope.
today was absolutely phenomenal. There's no other way to put it. Incredible. My number one sports experience, probably. I'd have to really sit down and think about it because I've had a lot of awesome ones, but it's tough to beat it. It's tough to beat it.
I actually, one more thing that I think that we really ought to mention, which is the Nike banner that they put up downtown.
Yep.
I've always admired the way that Nike takes care of the details, but for those unaware, they put up a large banner downtown, and we're talking several stories large, and it's Caitlin in her signature jump shot pose. And the great thing about it is, and for those of you who want to go see it, it is right across the street from the Old Cap parking garage. So it's right there on Burlington, for those who want to find it. And I think it's one of the newer buildings that was constructed. So what makes it great is, one, Caitlin is essentially the way they've got it oriented. Caitlin is essentially shooting, like banner Caitlin is shooting toward Carver Hawkeye Arena. So it's like from downtown personified. So they nailed that. And then as soon as Caitlin broke that record, they went ahead with part 2, which was another banner, a little bit smaller, but it was a banner of a hoop with the ball going in, and in that typical like Nike, elegant, in that Nike font, all it says was, "It was never a long shot." And like, oh, chef's kiss. Mwah. If I were Italian, I'd be doing like that is such perfect attention to detail, and so fitting, and we'll just even call it poetic for a player like Caitlin Clark. So the fact that even the details get taken care of on that sort of a level really speaks to how easy it is to, I would say, cheer for, to promote Caitlin Clark, and to see her be something that's bigger than basketball, or at the very least at the pinnacle of basketball today as we see it. So yeah, shout out to Nike. I did want to make sure that we said that before we got out of here today.
Yes, and they did that commercial, I believe. I was told that they did the commercial on TV as well, but they posted the commercial on the big board at halftime after she broke the record, which if you haven't seen it, I'm sure it's on Twitter. I'm sure Nike put it up. It was awesome. Incredible. Just like I said, from top to bottom today, including the Nike advertisements, which of course they crush. But one of these days, I've tweeted it a few times. One of the days where I'm incredibly, incredibly grateful to do what we do for a job. For a job. I've never woken up at 7 a.m. and been like, let's do it for a job before. So here's to days like this and doing what we are so lucky to do. The reason we're so lucky to do it is because of folks like you who subscribe to iowa.rivals.com. and get all of the premium content, recruiting in basketball and football. And of course, all the inside information on women's basketball, men's basketball, and football from myself, Ross, Adam, and the rest of our team at iowa.rivals.com. So if you want to subscribe, we would love to have you. Don't miss out on all that great content that we have for you. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, drop a comment. Did you make it to the game today? Who was your favorite celebrity that made it? What's Caitlin going to do next? How far are they going to go in the Big Ten tournament, the national tournament, the NCAA tournament as well? And also, if you're listening, if you might be listening on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, but you might also not be subscribed. So make sure you do that as well. And leave a rate and review on Apple Podcasts. That helps us out a lot. We really appreciate it. Anybody and everybody you know, tell them to drop a 5-star review so you can keep listening to us here on Hawkcast. Once again, my name is Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by Ross Binder and Adam Jacoby. For now, we will see you next time.